Hello everyone, this is Sarah from Crafting and Relaxing, and in this video I'd like to share with you an art journal page. And I prepped the page with gesso, which is just a white cream. I painted it on because I don't have a spatula, and then I let it dry. And what gesso allows you to do is move the paint or inks around on the page more without them being absorbed into the paper so quickly. So you can blend and move and you have a little more time to work, and you'll see people use it a lot. My art journal videos are quite a bit different than my card videos because I don't have a lot of experience art journaling or painting. This is actually only my second art journal page, and my goal on this page was just to try something a little bit different than my first page. And of course I would build in some blues, and quite honestly I don't have the entire rainbow in paint, but I have a lot of blues. I've given away or shared a variety of other colors that didn't interest me and were getting old. So what you see is I have no plan. I didn't have an inspiration video necessarily, or a technique I was trying. I was just putting a lot of paint on the page. And in this video I have sped it up a little. The project overall, in the time that I worked on it, probably took me an hour, and I did leave it overnight, I think, before I started gluing stuff onto the page. So I'll show you where we transition a little bit on that. So I've sped the video up and edited out a lot of sections where I take my heat gun and dry the pages. I'll show you some areas when I use stencils where I definitely would have used my heat gun, and you'll see it pop in and out a little. But the idea is I don't want you to sit around and watch paint dry. I want you to get some ideas, get some inspiration, and go on with your life. So in here I'm using water and the very small acrylic paints that sometimes you can even pick up 2 for $1 or $1 at your local craft store. And the reason I'm using the plastic container is because I'm super messy. So I do have the Tim Holtz media mat underneath this, but had I worked directly on it, there would have been a lake of paint and I would have had to stop. And the way I do videos like this is I start the camera and I work on my project, and I virtually sometimes forget the camera is running and leave and get stuff and come back. So I just try to edit all of that out for you so that you can see how the project came together and not wait while I look for a sponge or a paintbrush. So here I'm just putting some dots of darker paint on just to get, I'm experimenting is what I'm doing. I'm trying different paintbrushes, different approaches, that sort of thing. If you haven't painted a lot, it's fun to try your fingers, try chopsticks, try plastic bags and daubing it on there, try different size paintbrushes, whatever, to get different techniques that you like or that interest you. You might want texture, you might want to drip the paint directly onto the page and let it dry. There's all sorts of things you can do, and there's no right or wrong. If you've read my blog, you know what my sister tells me, and that's put the paint on the canvas. And the other thing that I mentioned in my blogs, and the reason for these art journal pages, is that I like to try new things. I've only worked with gesso a couple of times, and in this video is the first time that I work with the multimedia gel. So trying that out. Right now I'm prepping a Liquitex Basics paint and putting it on the glass, and you can see it's a beautiful blue. This is a little bit more expensive paint than the $50 per jar, but you can get these on sale for a couple dollars for a tube. I think maybe if you walk in without a coupon, they're about $5. This paint was a little bit chunky. Do not judge this Liquitex Basics paint by this video, because that tube of paint is pretty old and I should have put a little more water in it. So because of that, I thought, well, I have a spray bottle and I have water. So I put some water on the page, and I wish I had gotten it to dry right then and stopped it, because I love the streaks that it left. And I got those to some extent, but they faded out a little bit. You'll see as it dries. Okay, so there you can see it's dry, and it has a little bit of that movement, but not the specific strokes. So anyway, don't be afraid to experiment with different paints, different ways of applying it to the page. Oh, and like I was saying about my blog, it's at craftingandrelaxing.com, and it talks about just sort of my approach and how I get my approach to my projects. So here, this was literally just sitting on my desk, and I thought, I'm going to try it. It is a re-inker for an old stamp pad. So it's just a dye-based ink, which is the thinnest, easiest drying, and it's purple. And I just wanted a little splash of it, and the only purpley paint I had was lavender, and I'm not really a lavender fan. So I just wanted something dark. I took it and dripped it on. It was a nice experiment. I maybe should have added a little more so my drips were bigger, but still fun. So you can see I'm just trying to get it to move around on the page, but not make a giant mess, which can be a balance. So in this page at this point, I've got dots, texture, purple ink. The colors don't always come through the best in the video, but there is some variation in the blue and the color. Now I have just a cheapo sponge that's chopped up, and a stencil, and some gray of the like a 50-cent or $1 bottle of paint. Those dry very matte, which is sometimes really nice. I don't like a lot of shine on my pages, because if it's matte, you can mix it all together and it looks like it came that way. Sometimes you get too many different sheens and it gets messy, but it's nice to have that interest too. So the Liquitex paint has a little more sheen, so that's nice. So here I am. I'm just trying some gray. Somewhere I have silver, but I don't think this is actually silver paint. I think it's gray because I just wanted to try it out. It was something different. So the other thing that's really interesting is to look at your stencils and try and figure out what they'll look like when you use a portion of them. So you can see this is a very large geometric stencil, but when I put it on the page, it almost ends up looking like feather accents or a fern or something like that. So don't be afraid to experiment with your stencils. And I could take a different color paint and lay it next to it, and it would almost look like they were layered. So just mix it up and try different things, and don't be afraid. And that's kind of what art journaling is about. It'll be in your book, not necessarily on a wall. So if you don't like it, you don't have to open that page. You'll notice that I've switched colors of paint. This would be an example of where I edited out the drying. So I took the heat gun and dried the gray before I started laying that stencil over the gray, because I could have messed up that stenciling version. So just keep that in mind when you see me lay down a different stencil over what may be wet paint, that I probably stopped to dry it. And here I'm just trying to get some red down in like the crack of the book, and I don't want to mess around with the stencil, so I'm trying out a dot. You'll notice that I'm not using very much paint at all. I could use more, but I don't want to wait for dry time. I don't want to mess with it, and I don't need that much. Just to do a small page, it doesn't require a lot of paint. If I was on a big canvas, I would have a lot more paint on my palette or my media mat or whatever I was using for that. Or I might just be putting the paint right on the canvas. I probably am not going to be squirting a lot of paint into my art journal because I don't want to scoop it off. Here I'm using the ink blenders like you use for distress oxides or distress inks, and holding it up to the camera just so you can see. White isn't the best color to learn from that, of course, But so you can see the amount of paint that's on that brush. It is not very much, and there's really a lot. When I pull up the stencil, you'll see that this is a very white stenciling. It's not translucent at all. So it gives you an idea of how little paint you need. Remember, you can always slow a video down or stop it if you want, so you can pause and see if there's an angle. If you wanted to see how much was on that dauber again, you could go back, whatever you want to do. You can also speed them up more if you want to see it even faster, or just get to the end. So here we have, by now I've used 2 stencils, the first stencil in gray and red and the second stencil in white. And my only goal here was not to use the same stencils that I used on my art journal page. I only have a couple of stencils. I was trying to mix it up. So I dried that white section, and then I decided that I wanted it to go all the way to the edge of the page. So then I went back. So just be careful if you decide to add to your stencils that you dry them first if you're worried about smearing or smudging. And when you're learning, everything's a little harder. So when in doubt, you can dry it. The only trick is if you dry it, you can't blend things together. I don't necessarily want my stencil parts to blend. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with my background, and I want to experiment with the things I thought I would put on the page. So the hope and the dream, both of those I cut with a silhouette, and they're triple layer cardstock. Actually, that's not true. The dream one is triple layer cardstock glued together. And the hope was silver embossed, heat embossed 3 times, and then glued onto black paper. You'll see that a little better in a different part of the video, that it has black behind it. I left all of this in. This part right here, I didn't edit where I was fiddling with these things, because I hope it's not driving you crazy that it's sideways. That's literally how I worked on it. But I wanted you to be able to see that it doesn't just always come together instantly. Just because you've been doing paper crafts for a while or painting or whatever. Okay, this is where it all went terribly wrong, and I left this so you could see it. So I was trying to lighten that section up, and what happened was I lifted the paint a little bit, because this was before it had dried overnight and I was experimenting there. So then I added even more white and it got worse. So then I had to try and make it blue again, and then dry it, and then add some more blue and dry it. So this is an example. I leave these things in so you know you don't have to be scared. If it goes badly, just put more blue on. Had I slowed down and not panicked, I probably would have retextured the blue again. You'll see right there it's pretty dark, and I left it that way. So then I didn't have the contrast with the dark sections down in the bottom that I would have liked. But overall, I still like the page and I'm happy with it. It's just learning, right? But you can see I completely messed it up, lifted all the paint, the gesso got a little messy, and then it turned out fine. But what I learned from that was to be careful, because I had been layering and layering on it probably for, at least a half hour, 40 minutes at this point, and it got a little weak. And the gesso had dried overnight, so I put the gesso on it, let it dry, and then I worked on all this paint and stuff. So here I'm still experimenting, trying to figure it out, and I wanted enough contrast with the silver so that the word hope popped out and it didn't get lost in the patterns. That's what I was struggling with. And I couldn't decide which side of the stars to use. If you're a hearts person or dragonflies or whatever you see that you cut out of magazines or buy at the store or stickers, whatever inspires you. I love stars. I like silver. I like gold. And I like blue. I like blue everything. So I also like red and purple together. That's a college thing. So not everybody loves red and purple together. Okay, so here, this is where I'm opening up the multi-matte medium. And this is a brand new jar of it. And I got the Ranger brand. Tim Holtz also makes a couple different ones. Just be sure that you get one that is your style. This one is matte. It's not shiny. It's not the crackle finish. It's not the vintage yellowy finish. It's just to allow me to stick things on a page and not have them be shiny. And quite honestly, this is the very first time I'd ever used it. It was on my list of things I want to try. I loved it. I will use it again. The stars, I love how they turned out. They stuck to the page beautifully. There was no ripple from glue. Honestly, what I learned was the matte medium is for thinner stuff like paper. I should have just glued the word hope on with one of my thicker adhesives, like beacons, or maybe my art glitter glue would have worked. Something like that. I should have just glued that on with something big. It was a little tricky. I had to go back and touch it up. But the stars, I had a great time. I mean, at this point, I'm just like a little kid trying something new that I've never done before, smearing things on a page. People who know are probably laughing because the brush I'm using is probably ridiculously nice, but I have what you would consider junk brushes that I'm very sentimental about because they were my grandma's, and I have brushes that I bought brand new that I have no attachment to whatsoever. So it's just personal style and funny stuff. So there you go. You can see I finally decided to put the stars, the dark side and the white side up, and then right side up. Here we go. So it's dried, and I've gone pen shopping because turns out my silver marker got old and I threw it out. And I've sped this part up quite a bit because I don't want you to sit around. I didn't want you to watch paint dry, and I don't want you to sit around and watch me draw lines all day. But what I'm experimenting with here is just different ways to frame the page or add a little interest that are my style. I don't really like straight lines, so I like everything curvy or swirly. Do whatever you like. If you like things super symmetrical, get out your ruler. If you don't like lines at all and you just want dots or flowers or bows or hearts, draw whatever you want around your border that makes you happy. I love things that swirl and move, and I like circles and asymmetrical things, and you'll see that in my projects a lot. When you put the paintbrush on the page, it should make you happy, and when you see the page when it's done, it should make you happy. If it doesn't and you hate it, cut it out of your book and throw it away, or paint over it. Or I think it was Dina Wakely. She had a section in an art journal where there was a square cut out of a page, and it looked like it was intended to frame the page behind it. And it was because she just didn't like that part of the page. So I was very scared at first because the pages are connected to the book, and it seemed like a lot of pressure, and I really wanted one that was a disc-bound journal so I could take the pages out and work on them. And in fact, I've had fun with this. It's a little bit freeing because I know I can cut it out and I don't overthink it. So remember, we're supposed to be crafting and relaxing. There isn't a lot of free time. You should be doing something that you like, and you shouldn't be overthinking it and letting it stress you. So then I went back and I drew a double line on each side. I might have put it at the top and bottom, but because of how I placed things, I didn't really have room. And then I kind of loved that it was just on the sides because it wasn't symmetrical. I mean, it wasn't the same all the way around. So I didn't want another line over the tip of that star. So that's something to think about. If you want frames around your pages, you might not want to go all the way to the edge when you're gluing stuff on, right? I learned that. Then I thought my stars looked a little plain, so I took my silver marker and went back over them. And when I looked at this page today, I noticed that I also did that to the white stars with a black pen. And then I smeared it a little bit, so it's fine, but I wasn't too worried about you getting that final picture. But I love how the black stars turned out with the silver. So I hope this gave you some ideas and some inspiration. You might have inspiration from this page for a card or a canvas for your wall, or maybe you want to do art journaling, or maybe you have a list of products that you've been scared to try or you were curious about. The jar of matte medium was $7, and I had a lot of fun gluing those stars on, and I'll probably glue some more stars on later. So it's just something fun to think about, and keep it in mind when you're working on projects, and try something that you haven't necessarily done before. Use your stencils in a different way, or your stamps in a different way, or if you have inks in the drawer that you've never tried because you're not sure how to do them, get them out. Play with them. If you leave things in the drawer, they just get old anyway. So get them out and have fun with them. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Don't hesitate to leave me comments if it was too long, or I don't know, maybe there was a certain part that you would like to see differently in the future. Don't hesitate to let me know. And again, thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Crafting and Relaxing. Have a great day.